On January 5, 1066, King Edward the Confessor died without an heir. The English nobles, the Witenagemot, immediately crowned the wealthiest aristocrat in the country, Harold Godwinson. That decision triggered simultaneous invasion claims from Harald Hardrada in Norway and Duke William in Normandy. To defend his new crown, Harold relied on a military apparatus divided into two parts: his professional royal housecarls and the regional fyrd militia. In combat, they locked their round shields together to form a dense, overlapping wall. This force carried severe operational limitations. It was entirely infantry-based, and the militia consisted of local farmers who had to be dismissed by late summer to harvest their crops. By September 8th, after waiting months on the southern coast for the Normans, Harold ran out of supplies and sent his militia home. On that exact day, Harald Hardrada's Norwegian invasion force landed in northern England. A newly crowned king, facing a two-front war, now had to move an unmounted army across the length of the country before either invading force could establish a permanent beachhead. This animation tracks Harold's immediate operational response, a 185-mile forced march from London to Yorkshire. To cover that distance in just 4 days, his men averaged nearly 46 miles a day. They sustained this pace while carrying the heavy tools of their trade: broadaxes, wooden kite shields, and heavy knee-length mail hauberks. The speed of the march yielded total operational surprise. On September 25th, the English forces arrived at Stamford Bridge before the Norwegian invaders knew a hostile army was in the vicinity. Hardrada's forces had made a fatal tactical error. Believing the English were still weeks away, the Norwegians had left their heavy armor behind at their ships. Harold's heavily armored troops poured across the narrow choke point of the bridge, systematically grinding through the unprotected Norwegians in the freezing River Derwent. When an English arrow struck Hardrada in the windpipe, the remaining Norwegian shield wall disintegrated completely. The slaughter was nearly absolute. Of the 300 ships that arrived with the invasion force, the Norwegians needed only 24 to carry the survivors home. Harold eliminated the threat in the north, but by pushing his core professional infantry past the limits of human physical recovery, he crippled the exact troops he would need to defend the south. 3 days after the slaughter at Stamford Bridge, William of Normandy landed thousands of men and hundreds of ships at Pevensey, establishing a beachhead on the Sussex coast. This map traces Harold's strategic pivot. Abandoning the north, he forced his battered army into a 240-mile reverse march to intercept William. To reach the coast, the English infantry sustained 27 miles a day, layering physical exhaustion over the trauma of recent combat. When Harold finally formed his lines at Senlac Hill on October 14th, he commanded an entirely static, infantry-only army of between 7,000 and 8,000 men. This schematic compares the two forces. William brought an identical number of troops, but while the English deployed in a monolithic shield wall, the Normans divided their force between infantry, archers, and heavy cavalry. Harold took a defensive deployment at the top of a steep slope, anchoring his flanks in the thick woods and marshland to force a frontal assault. The clash that followed was not a swift strike. From 9 a.m. until dusk, the two armies engaged in a grueling 9-hour attritional struggle. Holding the high ground offered a distinct tactical advantage, but it could not offset the operational exhaustion of the English troops or their total lack of unit diversity. The battle opened with Norman archers firing uphill, but their arrows either bounced off the English shields or flew over the summit. When William's infantry advanced, they failed to break the interlocked formation. When a rumor of William's death caused the Breton division to retreat, William mobilized his cavalry to rally them. Equipped with couched lances and stirrups, the Norman horsemen possessed a lethal mobility that foot soldiers could not match. Seeing the Bretons fall back, undisciplined elements of the English militia broke their shield wall and charged down the hill in pursuit. William immediately counterattacked. His heavy cavalry intercepted the pursuing English on the open ground, riding down and slaughtering the exhausted, exposed foot soldiers. Recognizing the vulnerability of isolated infantry, the Normans shifted tactics. They executed a series of feigned flights, intentionally pretending to retreat to bait more English troops out of their defensive formation. For the rest of the afternoon, William systematically bled the English position. Archers fired high-angle barrages, followed immediately by heavy cavalry charges that hammered the weakened line. As the heavily armored English housecarls died, their places in the wall were filled by lighter, more vulnerable militia, accelerating the degradation of the defense. Near dusk, Harold was killed. With their king dead and their command structure broken, the remaining English forces fell into disarray and routed. Hastings was lost to a cold equation. A flexible, combined arms military dismantled an exhausted, monotactical force. On Christmas Day, 1066, William was crowned King of England inside Westminster Abbey. William's coronation launched a multi-year campaign of domestic eradication. When resistance flared in the north in 1069, William responded by systematically devastating the region's agriculture. The harrying of the north starved out the opposition and left the land in ruins. To lock down the physical geography of the country, the Normans initiated a rapid, nationwide construction program of hyper-militarized motte and bailey castles. Dropped into the middle of English population centers, these fortified strongpoints allowed a tiny elite of roughly 8,000 Normans to project constant military force over a hostile native majority. From these castles, William imposed feudal tenure. He claimed absolute possession of all land in the country, granting it back to his followers only in exchange for military service. Through extreme violence and rapid architectural domination, William converted a temporary military victory into a permanent architectural and administrative chokehold. The new regime systematically purged native Englishmen from all high governmental positions, earldoms, and senior offices within the church. To quantify the extraction of wealth from his new kingdom, William ordered a massive administrative survey in 1086, recorded in the Domesday Book. The meticulous Latin columns logged the exact landholdings of every tenant in the country, auditing the English landscape with cold, bureaucratic efficiency. As this map illustrates, the expropriation blanketed the countryside. Anglo-Saxon landowners were dispossessed, their properties transferred to William's followers. The Domesday data reveals that by 1086, only 5% of land south of the River Tees remained in the English hands. The events of 1066 resulted in the total, permanent dismantling of the native Anglo-Saxon aristocracy. The collapse of the Anglo-Saxon state was a mechanical failure, where the logistical exhaustion of a defensive infantry force directly enabled a foreign elite to hyper-efficiently rewrite an entire nation's registry.